Inside the Birds is back. What's up, everybody? Jeff Mosher here alongside Adam Kaplan. We got yet another potpourri style Inside the Birds, as we've got a lot of different subjects that we're going to tackle tonight. Adam, people kind of liked the last podcast. They reached out to us on social media saying they liked how we went from topic to topic. And that's kind of a good thing because we have about 4 or 5 or 6 different things that we want to hit on today. We got some lingering Deshaun stuff, some Jadeveon Clowney in the news type stuff to hit on. And of course, I think what everybody's really dialed into right now, as it is July 12th when we record this, and training camp is technically 16 days away. The question of, well, where do things stand? Are we really going to have training camp start on July 28th? So a lot of good stuff to get into.
Yeah. We're taping this late Sunday night, so you're hearing this just hours after we're taping it. And look, man, I've talked to a bunch of coaches. We'll get into that later, but they're starting to really get concerned, man. There's a real concern about the potential of, I don't want to say not having a season, but how could it start on time? Because Jeff, the COVID numbers are crazy in Florida, like just mushroom awfully big. I mean, it's a real shame.
Right.
And look, you got two teams. You got obviously the Bucks and the Dolphins there, and they're at their home facilities. But everyone be safe out there, obviously. And it's not going away. Unfortunately, I was hoping we by this point, by July, we would be in better shape as a country with put this behind us. But we're not even remotely close.
No, and in some areas, we're in better shape in some areas, in a worse shape, way worse in others. And obviously,
Correct.
With NFL teams in every city, it causes a lot of issues. It's funny because I heard you on with Mike Gill on Thursday in your normal spot on 97.3 ESPN Football at 4, and you were talking about whether or not training camp would start on time. And I heard you be like, hey, man, Jeff's been saying, I don't know where he's getting it from, but he's saying that there's some doubt from some people in the NFL about whether or not July 28th is a reasonable start date for training camp. And, again, I'll keep repeating when I speak to people around the NFL, it's not that they're saying no, it's just that they're telling me, I don't know, man. I think that they would love to know that everything's going to be done and settled, but we have a lot of the same questions facing the league and the players right now, 16 days out from camp, as you did 26 and 36 days out from camp.
I'll even move this up, Jeff. Right, Jeff. I don't know if you realize this. Well, you actually reported on our show, would actually have been this weekend, that the Eagle coaches were supposed to be in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And self-isolating. So I talked to a lot of coaches. I know the Bear and Raider coaches report on July 20th, Jeff. You're talking about 1 week from this show debuting?
Right.
Those coaches have to be in their buildings? I mean, obviously these clubs will be able to get back in their building to make sure everything's cleaned up and so forth. And the protocols are going to be, I guess we might as well start there, Jeff. The protocols around the National Football League are still being finalized. With the NFLPA and the NFL, they're going to get this stuff finalized this week. We know what it's going to look like. We know how restricted the practices are going to be, how much spacing they're going to be. And so forth. But, man, it is a major challenge. I did not think it would take this long for both sides to agree. But as you and I have outlined for the last, I guess, a couple weeks at least, there are so many issues that both sides have to get through.
So I'm wondering, Adam, take the reporter cap off for a minute, because we tend to do that a lot. We just give you the straight facts, and sometimes we don't really put our spin on it. But I'm just curious if you've thought about what football may or may not look like, right? Because we don't exactly know all of the rules that are going to be in place. But have you thought at all to yourself at any time over the last 2 weeks, is this going to be worth it? Am I going to really – is the fan going to enjoy watching a fanless game where the teams that are practicing have barely been able to touch each other on the practice field? Have you wondered at all whether this is going to be worth it or just going to look like a mess?
I would say I've given a little thought of it, only because I talked to personal people and coaches who were working in 2011 coming out of the lockout. So I want to know what a football would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had a personnel director who's pretty plugged in say to me that he thought it was until weeks 3 or 4 of the regular season that the football looked like it should look. And training camp for the team that he was on was a disaster because you had rookies who didn't know the playbook. and you were trying to get them up to speed. Remember, Jeff, not only there were no practices, no MIGs, nothing. Players were not allowed to have the playbook. So you're asking rookies to come in and learn when they don't know your playbook. Like how are they supposed to learn unless they cheated, of course? I reported when I worked for FoxSports.com that there's at least one AFC team that everyone guessed it was the Patriots. It was not. I'll say that much. At least one team that I know of that gave their players the playbooks. At least they came in with some knowledge. But yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line is the league is already minted. Teams are already coming out in their notes to their season ticket holders, the Browns and the Packers and several other teams, that if they have fans, it's going to be minimal. One team said like 11,000. Well, they're giving fans now the ability to get a credit or get a refund for the season and not lose your season tickets. Just take the year off. And the reason why they're doing that is, Jeff, because think about this. If nobody wants a credit and nobody wants a refund, how are you going to make a decision who goes and who doesn't go?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And that's just really one half of the equation. The other half is, what's it going to look like? How good is the quality of the product going to be if the practice restrictions are so great that you can't even have normal 11-on-11s or whatever you would normally have, or you have such a small amount of time to acclimate your free agents, acclimate your rookies? So, I mean, we've talked about that a lot, but I think we just all have to be resigned to the fact that even if you thirst for football, like I do, like you do, like everybody does, if you yearn for football, you also have to understand. I sound like a stanza there. Do you yearn?
Yeah, I noticed that you're near Caxton, you're Brooklyn or whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, you have to I think we all got to be understanding that no matter whatever you're getting, whatever you think you're getting is going to be probably a little bit different than what you're expected. So, I mean, beggars can't be choosy. I think any football for some will be satisfactory, but you know how fans are, and we are too as media, right? You see something bad or you see something unsightly and you're like, that's not great. And we have to be prepared for that.
Right. But the question is, okay, so let's move this forward here. We have a ballpark idea what practices are going to look like in training camp, because they put the NFL's discussed this. I've seen the memos. I know what a ballpark idea, what it should look like. The question is on 11-on-11 football, what you can do, what you can't do, 7-on-7s. Okay, let's extrapolate this to the regular season. How in the world you have to have 11-on-11 in the regular season? You have to.
Yes, you do.
You can't tackle. We know that, but you don't tackle in season anyway.
Wait, are you saying during practice? Oh, you're saying during practice, right?
Yeah. How can you not have practice 11-on-11?
I think you have to. If not, I think it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And I will say, if the ultimate goal is health and safety, it can't just be relegated to COVID. If you don't get to practice 11-on-11 during the week, and you expect guys to go out and play real live games and have everything, as they say, the bullets flying or whatever, and you haven't practiced that all week, you're more vulnerable to injury.
Exactly.
So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You got to get your timing. Jeff's talking about 11-on-11 timing. Yeah, that's the coaches I've spoken with, they're all for the restrictions now. They weren't so, I would say, in March, but now they see what we're dealing with in the country, and these guys have families. They're very concerned about it. Now, the big issue we should add, we haven't really talked about this, is how much you're going to test. Because the PA wants it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, every day.
I thought it was every other day. Okay, every day.
Whatever I saw, I can't remember now, but whatever it is, it's definitely more than the NFL was talking about. See, here's the thing. You should be able to have 11-on-11. If you're testing enough, you should have it. But the problem is, if you're doing it every other day, how quickly you're getting those tests back, because if someone is positive and you from an off, like, you remember, if you're not doing it every day, that person can't practice.
That's right.
So we got issues here.
I'm very curious to see how this thing unfolds, and I'm happy. I've been saying this for a while, and it sounds like it's going to happen. But I've said somebody else is going to have to show us the way, right? Because football doesn't start technically the season until September. And we knew baseball was going to try to come back. We knew the NBA was going to try to come back. You've seen golf come back. And we haven't seen the NBA come back yet. They're about to. They're all in Orlando. And then, of course, they're playing soccer in Europe. So it seems to be going okay there. So I think we'll get a little bit better of idea the next 3 or 4 weeks as baseball and basketball kick off, if this thing is going to be feasible for football. But again, I'll emphasize, football, you're dealing with a lot bigger roster and no bubble environment. like you're dealing with hockey and basketball. So there's still going to be more risks involved, but I do think these other sports will help show us the way as far as if it's even possible to get this done. So we'll see.
Well, Jeff,
go ahead.
One thing I want to add, because I want to get to that issue, and you could call it issue if you want, with Lane Johnson and Matt Pryor being in Texas. But this plays into it. The big issue, Jeff, and people who are really studying COVID know this. Well, you can't understate this. You shouldn't. When people go state to state, that is a big issue for carrying the virus. And the asymptomatic people who feel great, they don't know they're going from state to state. You may be around people. I could tell you when I was in the Outer Banks in June, I was wearing a mask. I got a haircut. The woman who was cutting my hair did not wear a mask. And I had to make a decision. I probably shouldn't have had the haircut. If I had to go back, I would not have done it. And I would have just had this big mushroom on my head. But did you even ask her, or does it a weird? I imagine this is not your normal barber because you're out in the outer. No, exactly. No, I would happen to be there on vacation, and I was, I was concerned about it. But it was so short. It was like literally 12 minutes. She just took like a razor and just like it was like a carpet. It was hilarious. But the fact of the matter is, man, this is the problem when you go state to state. I could have been a carrier, but what I did was, not that I'm going anywhere. I've barely did anything in terms of seeing people since the combine, Jeff. Since when you and I were there, I play tennis twice a week with a friend of mine, and that's it, man. So what I did is when I got back, I self-isolated. And by the way, that's the protocols. Like in Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, the governor, actually announced that he suggested, it's not like a law, but he suggested that people who are coming back from all these states, and North Carolina was listed, that you self-isolate. You should. So, Jeff, that brings up the next question. We know that Lane Johnson and Matt Pryor were in Texas for that summit. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, I was going to get this a little later, but we can bring it up now.
Since we're talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So I'm a little torn. Look, I mean, Lane co-founded this event. It's called the OL Mastermind Summit. We wrote about it on InsideTheBirds.com, so you can check it out. And he and Duke Manyweather, who is a renowned offensive line instructor, co-founded this a few years ago. They've done it every year. This year, they moved it indoors to the Omni in Frisco, which is about half hour north of Dallas. And they're trying to take as many precautions as possible. There's been some videos on Twitter. A lot of guys are wearing masks. It's not all hand usage. That's a big part of it. It's not all on-field type work, but there was a big part of that. And there are about 50 offensive linemen there, including Matt Pryor, who's trying to be the Eagles' right guard. So I said this, Adam, and I'm curious about your opinion. Now, this is going to be judged in a vacuum. If Lane Johnson and Matt Pryor report to camp on the 28th and they're fine and nothing's wrong, then everybody's going to say, well, it's great. They were able to take precautions. They were fine. They were able to apply their craft and get better, because that's what this summit is about, offensive line technique and learning. If they come and one of these guys reports positive for COVID and have to quarantine and miss a lot of camp, people are going to say, well, why did you have to go to this indoor summit in Texas, of all places, where COVID has had, and I wrote this in the story, they've had about 10,000 new cases a day for the last 3 or 4 straight days. I mean, it's skyrocketing in their area. So, and at a time where the NFLPA has urged that its players not do workouts together. So we're seeing that. We're seeing Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders and Deshaun Jackson working out together. It's hard to have a concrete opinion on this. I mean, you want guys to be working and being safe, and maybe they are, but they're also not heeding the advice from their own union.
Yeah, look, it's real simple. And I don't, maybe I have no idea if they even tested. Did they test the players there that were there?
Lane said that he tested positive before the event. So I don't know if they tested people.
Tested positive?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Lane said he tested negative.
Okay, Thank you. Yeah. No, okay, so he did test for them. Okay, good. But here's the thing. We talked about self-isolation a little bit earlier. When he and Matt Pryor get to their homes or their wherever they're going to go, before they report to NovaCare, they've got to self-isolate, man. Lane's got a family. I hope he does this, because that's really the key, is for at least 2 weeks. man, and then get tested again. This is pretty serious, man. When you put yourself in a situation like that, we love Lane, but this is a concern, man. You got to be careful and take care of yourself as well as others.
Yeah, if I'm being totally honest, I'm surprised that they didn't postpone this event and cancel it for this year, especially because it happens in Texas. And as I mentioned, like I said, they had 10,000 new cases a day, roughly for the last 3 or 4 days. So that doesn't bode well. However, I mean, they all know the risks involved, and I did see some videos from it, and I did see people wearing masks. So hopefully everything will be fine. But certainly, if they're not fine, I think that they are fairly criticizable if either one of those two, Matt Pryor or Lane Johnson, or whoever, I mean, there were a lot of other NFL offensive linemen there. If they report to their respective camps and one of them catches COVID and has to miss some time, because I want to reemphasize this. You report on July 28th, assuming that's the day that everybody's about to report. There's not going to be preseason games. You really have about 4 or 5 weeks before the season is supposed to start. If you have to miss 2 just to quarantine, you're putting yourself way behind the 8 ball. Even a veteran like Lane, but especially a guy like Matt Pryor, who's trying to win the starting right guard job.
Well, it'll be way worse. Lane, it's not such a big deal, but for Pryor, it's a major issue. If God forbid he tests positive, let's hope that everything's okay. But see, here's the problem now. Then you have to make a decision if you're the Eagles, and we'll get into the potential of rosters being trimmed.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you turn? I mean, I don't know where you've got a bunch of undrafted free agents is all you really can do, or guys like Jack Driscoll, who I know is going to. They're going to look at cross-train him at guard and right tackle, but it's not good, man. They're already light on experience. That would not be good if Pryor was not available.
No doubt about it. All right, let's get into a few things. First, I want to remind everybody, catch our recent ITBs. We've done some pretty good ones. We've had one on Jason Peters coming back, one on some of their linebacker issues, especially if there's no preseason games and this shortened camp. Their thinness at linebacker right now is almost unacceptable as far as, having enough guys to fill roles that they need. We've talked about the expectations for Jalen Reagor, which may be even more depending on what happens with Deshaun. We'll get into that. And of course, the challenges that we're speaking of now for training camp. And then we've done some great ITBs. We had Brian Westbrook on last week. We had Andrew Brandt the week before. Deshaun Jackson, you and I did last week, Westbrook the week before, and Andrew Brandt the week before that. And all three of them, I think, are really solid. So make sure you're checking out ITB TV, our YouTube channel. Along with our Footballs at 4 that we do every day on 97.3 South Jersey. All right, so let's get into the kind of I guess we call it big news because as you and I deal with a lot, Adam, somebody says something or something becomes a headline and people start flooding us on Twitter or Facebook or wherever they hit us up. Obviously, a couple of days ago, I think it was John Clayton. Does he still work for ESPN or is it ESPN Radio that he does?
No. What happens is he left ESPN, like I did. He was laid off the same time I was, but John worked for the Seattle station in ESPN Seattle station, 710, I think it is. And he went on our friend Mike Gill's show in South Jersey, ESPN South Jersey station. And what was interesting is I listened to the interview. It's nothing like has been put out there and blogged. It's just not. If you listen to it, as I did on Sunday, what John did say is, and this is kind of my summary of it, that Clowney's looking to sign with a good team. John said, and I know part of this story, but John actually said he turned the Dolphins down twice. We know he turned down the Browns. I talked to the Browns recently. They really want the player, even though they are keeping Olivier Vernon. They cut Vernon's pay, but they would love to get him. But he clearly does not want to go to Cleveland. What John said is he's looking to sign with a good team where he can win. Kind of like the Eagles. He didn't say he wants to sign with the Eagles. I think if you listen to the interview closely, he didn't say, he wants to sign with the Eagles. He didn't say that.
Right.
But because people don't listen sometimes closely, they think they hear something because they want to run with it.
Right.
They want to make a headline.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not what he said. I mean, I listened to it twice, actually, because I was expecting one thing and got another. And John, it's funny. Our friend Mike Gill asked about $9 to $10 million a season. And then John talked about how a couple of things didn't work out. He may be willing to take half of what he was asking for. John gave it a couple different numbers. maybe what Seattle was looking at. Seattle wanted to bring him back. They made a pretty significant offer. Started free agency. He turned that down. Talking to the Seahawks, they would not offer him anywhere close to that if they re-engage each other. So look, let's move this forward here. So that's Clayton stuff.
Right.
So there's really nothing that other than you could see where they might be intertwined because the Eagles need Clowney would be an upgrade over Derek Barnett at right defensive end. That's where you would line them up.
Yeah.
And let's get to Brian Baldinger's situation.
Wait,
Jeff,
real quick though, and Clowney's a great player. I mean, he can play in any scheme. He showed that
3-4, 4-3. Yep.
From what I've seen of him, both in Houston and in Seattle, he has been a moved piece. Like I've seen him line up over left tackle, right tackle, and then almost like a joker all in the same game. And that's not something Jim does a lot. We've talked about maybe him doing that with Jannard Avery because Avery doesn't really have a natural starting position. He's a short, explosive guy. But do you think that scheme even matters in this case? I mean, if you have an opportunity to get Jadeveon and Clowney at a discount price, does that stuff matter?
Yeah. So I'll answer that question as we turn to what our friend Brian Baldinger hinted on Twitter, man. That Baldy, it's funny. I'll tell you a story about Baldy. Baldy put something out. God, it's been 4 years ago. He put something out in the summer of 2016 that turned out to be correct, but the Niners didn't like it. That Chip Kelly and their GM then for the 49ers, who's now with the Jaguars, Trent Baalke, were not getting along. Yeah. They're not talking, and the Niners were not happy. They denied it. Well, guess what? Months later, it turned out to be correct. So you got to take Baldy at his word. He hinted that a big move's coming this week. So my question to you, my friend, is what could that move be?
Well, I mean, like there's three guys, right? There's Clowney, there's Ngakoue, and then there's Jamal Adams. You and I have already talked about Jamal Adams being the least likely to
that would be a shocker.
What you have to give up, what you have to pay him. I mean, I only think at this point, Clowney makes the most sense out of the three because he's a free agent, because he hasn't obviously gotten the contract he's looking for, or else he wouldn't be a free agent right now. If his number has come down considerably and he's willing to sign a 1-year deal, then I can see it, Adam. Theoretically, I can see it, but I don't know if is true. I'm just saying, like, this is what would make most sense for the Eagles: a 1-year deal for, I don't know, 8 to 10 million or something like that, and then you have the ability to either re-sign him during the season if you really like the fit, or if he walks, you maybe get a comp pick after that. But anything more than that, I think it's the same. I think we've already outlined what the Eagles' financial situation is and why it's really not tenable unless he's willing to take a lot less money than he wanted.
So Jeff, we did a show in mid-May. Part of it is where we talked about Clowney. So I reported exclusively on that show that the Eagles were not interested in Clowney, and again, that was 2 months ago. But things have changed here. So what's changed is he's not signed. I never saw this coming. I got to be honest with you.
Agreed.
I can't believe he's still. What's that?
I thought he would be signed by now as well.
Yeah, for sure. So then the next question would be, could Clowney be that big move? I mean, that to me is where you got to start. We'll get to Jamal Adams in a second. I do want to address that. Though I think it's unlikely. I still want to address that because, again, Baldy said a big move. Well,
right.
Devontae Freeman's not a big move. You know why he's not? Because he would be a backup to Sanders. I don't buy that as being one of the moves. So I think he scratched him off, right?
Yeah, let me throw a curveball in there because Baldy is an offensive lineman and was at the offensive lineman mastermind summit that we were talking about with Lane Johnson and Matt Pryor. Is it possible he caught wind of maybe like a guy like Larry Warford? I just, I'm trying to connect dots here. He's
a name. I mean, he's a name. He's certainly a name.
Yeah.
But I'm looking big game hunting here. I'm looking for the big time player.
It felt like Baldy was suggesting that, right?
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't do things like this. So you got to think, right? Exactly, Jeff. You would think it was somebody big. So before I get to Clowney, Jamal Adams. It just, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We've talked, we addressed this, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. I know the Jalen Mills situation. You just have to see. Rodney McLeod is starting. There's no question about that. Next year, there's some fully guaranteed money. There's not a lot, but they're into him. Will Parks is a fascinating player. when we had Greg Cosell on to break down the Eagles, he really liked Will Parks. They drafted Kayvon Wallace. So, Jeff, not that obviously Adams is better than all these guys, but he's more of a box safety. It just doesn't seem to me like this will be a move, but I could be wrong, but it just doesn't make any sense on the surface.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to where we originally were with Jamal. Great player, and of course the Eagles need a safety, but too much to give up, too much money. I just don't think that's not the type of position the Eagles prioritize the way they do D-line, for example, or O-line. So if I were going to take a guess, and we'll see going forward, maybe Clowney is back in play at a different kind of number than what we thought, a month from now. One guy that his name always seems to get glossed by though, but I still think he would help the Eagles. And this is a position I said I would like the Eagles to still make a move at corner is Logan Ryan. I mean, he's another one. There were reports that he might go to the Jets and that it was some kind of done deal. It clearly wasn't. And he also is still out there, Adam. And you wrote about him on InsideTheBirds.com, I think about a month ago, as still being a free agent who some teams see as a slot and some teams see can play both outside and the slot.
Yeah, last year for the Titans, he played everywhere. Slot corner, outside corner, safety, linebacker. He had a tough year. Like, teams picked on him. He's a tough, smart, savvy guy. He's not real big physically. He had played majority on the outside for probably 3/4 of his career. Now he's playing a lot more inside than he normally would. That's the way teams see him. They see him as a nickel. The Jets like him. But the Jets were trying to figure out where they would line him up. Last time I checked there. I'm not saying it doesn't make any sense. And the Eagles need corners. But, man, they really need an outside corner, a true outside corner. Ryan is really not that at 29 years old.
Right.
So I don't see that. I mean, I'm not going to eliminate it because he would help. You can find a way for him to help you. But the Eagles, Jeff, they have like 3 slot corners. Do they need another one? Would it be better than them? Yeah, they love that. Talking to them, they love Roby Coleman. They think he's – I use that term twitchy. That's the term they gave me. I mean, they really like him. So I don't see it, but I put that never say never. But the one with Clowney, man, I'll tell you what. I've come down to you come down to this here. I remember Bill Polian telling me you never turn down an upgrade. You just don't. Now, obviously, if you have – Peyton Manning as he had, you're not going to get an upgrade over him.
Right.
We had Peyton with the Colts, but Clowney, this is not debatable. Clowney's better than Derek Barnett. Derek Barnett, said flashes, but he has not played like a first-round pick yet. Clowney's clearly better. As you said, if you could get him cheap on a 1-year deal, this is, again, people kept asking me. I said, just to update my information, what I'd said was this. If they were going to make a big move for big money, which I probably should have added, it would be for Yannick Ngakoue, if they're going to do one. But the problem is Ngakoue wants a ton. You got to give up a first or second round pick to the Jaguars. But paying this guy $20 to $22 million a year, it's tough to do. I'm not saying you wouldn't do it. Right. Here's the question. Would you rather have Clowney on a 1-year deal, see what happens? See, if he plays well, now he's 27. He's a little bit older, not much older than Ngakoue. But Clowney's got a major injury history, which is why you have to protect yourself. You're going to do a 1-year deal, or you're going to 1-year deal for the second year, but you can get out after year 1 with very minimal dead money. Jeff and I have outlined a lot that the Eagles have major cap issues next year. Really, for the first time in Howie Roseman's career, they actually have a real challenge. We did that show back in mid-May where we outlined every big contract, and the cap numbers, Jeff, the gains that they have, they're not $5 million. They're like $10 to $12 million for some of their major players.
That's right.
So to me, if they were going to do one of these guys that are out there, Clowney would be my vote for it. I don't know yet for a fact, but it seemed to me it would make sense because if you could get this guy on the cheap, who thought in mid-July, Jeff?
That's why it makes the most sense, Adam. You don't have to give up anything to get him from a draft compensation, and you're getting him at a time where he'd be at a discount value compared to what people thought he was going to make when he hit. Remember, people were talking about him being the first $20 million a year pass rusher in the NFL, and obviously, clearly, he's not getting $20 million.
Well, no, but Tank Lawrence got, I think, like around 21. But
were they saying maybe first $25 million a year or something?
No. But he wanted $22 million. He wasn't getting that with his injury history. Right. I thought all along if Bus Cook could get him a deal that had a lot of upside, let's say $8 to $10 million plus major upside, The way you got to do it to get him to 12 to 14 million, you got to put per game roster bonuses if he's available. He gets that. Could be 200 grand per game, whatever it is, man. You got to protect yourself. But see, here's the deal. Think about this. If you're an Eagles fan, if they got Clowney, this line is sick. Clowney at right DN.
Oh yeah.
Hargrave, Cox, Malik Jackson, Ridgeway. There's not a better 4 of D tackles. Brandon Graham, who's still terrific.
Yeah.
And then you've got, then Derek Barnett becomes your backup right DN. That's a pretty damn good backup right DN.
Yeah.
Josh Sweat's your 4th DN. You don't have to worry about Sharif Miller. Remember, folks, he's still signed through 2022. It's not a big deal. Jernard Avery, look, you gave up a 3 for him, Jeff. I don't know. It was a 3 or 4. I don't remember. Do you remember what it was?
4.
4 or 3?
4.
Oh, 4. Okay, 4. So he did not, obviously not going to play very much if you get Clowney, but you don't care because you know what? You get Clowney. He never gets double teamed because you got Cox to worry about. You got Hargrave to worry about. And you don't have to use Clowney inside anymore. You don't have to overwork him. And the other thing is because Barnett's a backup, you only have to play Clowney 35 to 40 plays a game.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. Right? So if I'm an Eagles fan today, I'm feeling a little bit better than I was maybe a month ago about the odds of the Eagles landing Jadeveon Clowney. But remember, Seattle's still there and still looking at the number, and we'll just have to see.
Right.
I don't know if it's a given by any means, but
right. We're not saying it's going to happen. We're just looking at if Baldinger puts the stuff out there, if the big name player that's still available.
Right.
Jamal Adams, it's impossible to put a percentage on it. I don't put percentage on these things. I'm not involved in it, so I just tell you what I know. Just based on the way the roster building, it just seemed to me. Oh, but the other thing I want to add, why it really makes sense is compensatory pick. The guy's an unrestricted free agent. You can get as high as, depending on the contract and productivity, as high as a 3rd round pick if he walks after year 1. If you only do a 1-year deal,
right?
That just lines up to me. But again, we'll see what happens. But
it helps. But I do want to address Adam because some people hit us up on Facebook saying, would they sign him so that they can get themselves a 3rd round pick the following year?
Up to a 3rd round pick. It should
you're not just guareed a 3rd round pick.
Correct.
I mean, first of all, the guy has to have a good year, and then second of all, he has to sign a big contract, and then third of all, it's about net gains versus losses. So the Eagles can't be big spenders in free agency and also expect a 3rd round pick because anybody they sign could cancel that out. Now, you and I have talked about their cap issue, so it's very likely they're going to be big players in free agency next year anyway. But still, it's just not a given that you sign a guy, he walks, and you get a 3rd round pick. I just wanted to you don't sign a guy with the intention of solely getting a compensatory pick for it the following year.
No, but it could, right. But right. I think sometimes it's like with Cam Newton. Well, the Patriots could get up to a 3rd round pick. That's obviously in the back of their mind, but that's not why they did it. They did it because they're looking to upgrade their quarterback position.
Absolutely. If he has a really good year, you'd think they want to keep him.
Of course. And now with Clowney, if he happens to be the guy that they pursue, and at times a wasting here with Clowney coming off his muscle core surgery, the Eagles would have some leverage here because we're almost at mid-July. He's coming off yet another surgery. He's had microfracture surgery. I looked all the injuries up. He's had meniscus surgery over his career. He's had 3 to 4 knee surgeries in total.
Right.
I know he's only 27. It's almost hard to understand, but he's only 27. He turned 27 this past February. So this season he will not even turn 28.
Wow.
If you and I run the front office, we're signing this player because you know what, he takes us to the next level. And the thing is, he's a speed to power rusher like there's nobody like this kid, and he's 34.5-inch arms, Jeff.
I know.
What do you find? You don't find guys like this in mid-July. Come on.
No, he's definitely.
I was not expecting this. I was not expecting him to be available. I thought he might have signed a week or so ago with the team, not by Cleveland. I know there were some other teams involved, but the fact that he's still available. If I'm Howie Roseman, I go to Jeffrey Lurie and say, hey, Jeff, what can we get this cash for the season? If the cash is available now, Ngakoue, before we move on to their next subject. It's just so much money, and you got to give him a 1st or 2nd round pick. Now, he's younger. He does not have an injury history.
Right.
He's a great kid, but forget about the social media stuff. He's just trying to get out of there. He's a great kid. So intriguing, but you got to give up. Now, you would trade Derek Barnett if you were going to try to trade him to Jacksonville. I mean, if you're trying to get Ngakoue out of Jacksonville, you trade Barnett, and then but the thing is, here's the other thing we'd have to, before you move on here, if you're Ngakoue, Are you willing to play under your contract like Jalen Ramsey is with the Rams and not get extended this season? Are you willing to work with the Eagles? And that's just, again, this is he's a real long shot, but I'm just trying to explain to people how it's got to work, because as we've outlined, their cap issues next year, they're no joke. I know people were screaming about it. It's definitely an issue.
Well, we're going to get into that because it actually could become even more problematic if certain things go through. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. First, I want to remind everybody that sports are coming back, but casino games never left. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has an endless amount of casino games to play, all from the comfort and safety of your own home. And right now, first-time casino players on DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino can play risk-free up to $200 for their first 24 hours of casino play. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now and find the casino games in the top navigation bar to stop playing. If you want options, you've got slots and blackjack and roulette and table games with live dealers and more. There's everything. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino is a legal, safe, and secure gaming app. You can deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. Plus, DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has new promotions every day, so be sure to check out the app daily. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now and use that promo code ITB to play up to $200 in casino games risk-free. That's promo code ITB to play risk-free up to $200 for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only, in partnership with Hollywood Casino and Penn National Racecourse. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Adam, one of the things I wanted to get into, and we kind of alluded to that, is these discussions that are going on right now between the NFL and the Players Association on return to work protocols. And I saw a tweet from Tom Pelissero, who works for the NFL Network, and I thought the players, listen, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I thought the players had a pretty decent counter proposal, and which they said was, forget that 35% salary in escrow, none of that, but we'll have a flat salary cap of $198.2 million for 2021 for next year. Ooh, and then any revenue losses in this coming year will be spread over the 2022 to 2030 cap. So that's a good way of taking a lot of money and just spreading it over a 10-year span there. And the players are willing to understand that the cap will take that hit. And all fully guaranteed money would be paid even if the games are canceled. So Monday, when most people are going to listen to this, is when there's supposed to be a call. Of course, the owners are going to say, because, there's never anything an agreement anymore until it gets really ugly. But I thought that actually was pretty decent. Maybe the owners will be not so great on the fully guaranteed money.
That's the issue.
Canceled, I'm sure. But the bottom line is, if even some of this is passed and they do agree to a flat salary cap of 198.2 in 2021, then it's like, oh, well, the Eagles were already way over the cap. And now I don't know if the carryover money is going to help them as much as it would normally, because normally the cap goes up a little bit. So it's like two forms of relief, the carryover and the cap going up.
Right. So the PA, Jeff, thinks that typically that the cap will go up $8 to $10 million a year. And that's pretty much what it's been over the last 10 years. The problem here is this: if you're a team like the Eagles and you have major cap concerns for next year, well, what you kind of do this year is you want to move a lot of money from this year. So let's say, for instance, they wanted to sign Clowney. If he's going to take up $8 to $10 million of cap space or even more, you're not going to have the money that you thought. Right. Because remember, they have to sign the rookies. We're going to get into that in a second, Jeff. So this becomes a problem, man. I get it what the PA is proposing here, and the NFL is going to have their say over it, but it's not good for clubs that are really tight against the caps in 2021, because this ability to move your excess cap space from one year to next is very important, and that's not good if you're a club like Philly, who has some challenges, and you don't want to keep restructuring the same players, man. The not only the potential dead money, it's these dummy years. It's just not good. You're going to still have to hunt for players who you want to keep restructuring. I mean, it's just that you're going to run out of players at some point.
Right. And again, this folds into our other topic about potentially shortened rosters, which we're expecting to hear from, I guess, hopefully by the end of this week. I mean, you never know, but right now they're at 90. They could go to 80. They could go to 75.
I hope not. I can't. That's crazy.
I know. You've spoken to some coaches about it, though.
Yeah.
As far as like, are they planning for this right now?
Yes. Yeah, so what happened was I was catching up with a couple coaches this week, and one particular said that he was here. He goes, look, I just want you to know that this is not. I'm not saying it's definitely happening. Just talk amongst us that we're hearing from our personnel people that it's going to happen that they're trimming rosters, but opinion of this one guy from what he's hearing, he's like, look, I don't think they're just going to randomly cut people. He goes, I think what will happen is they'll send guys home. They may or may not have them sit in meetings virtually because we're not going to have them in our building and they're not going to practice. He goes, what we want to avoid is obviously just cutting players.
Right.
Because let's say they cut down to 75, right? Let's go to the Eagles right here.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of guys are going to be cut are Adrian Killens, Micah Warren, Prince Smith, a guy that they would really take a look at.
Right.
Now, if you get down to
maybe
Manasa Bailey, who could run, but he definitely would be one of the top 10 guys to be cut. If you get down to 75, now you're talking about Kyle Aletta.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about Albert Huggins, probably wouldn't make it anyway. Now you're getting into maybe the Deshaun Halls is coming back from ACL reconstruction.
Yeah.
Raekwon Williams, who they wanted to compete against Anthony Rush.
Man, I would hope that Raekwon would be one of those priority guys that they don't cut, but you never know.
15 again. Now, when you're talking about 15 guys being clipped,
right?
I think that's a little too much. But the fact of the matter is, as this coach said, then the other thing he said, he goes, we were hearing that in season that the practice squad guys would not practice; they would also study virtually.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, no, this is not official. We don't know if this is even a fact. Because this is just the stuff that our personnel people were discussing with some of the scenarios. So, like you said, hopefully by the end of the week, they come to a solution. It's certainly not going to be 90 from everything we're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Either going to be 80 or 75. 80 makes more sense to me. And you'd hate to cut. Why would you cut players? Just don't have them be in your building.
I agree.
Keep them virtually. That's all.
What concern level do you have right now that I'm going to give you two things. One, that this is going to turn into a kind of MLB situation where the agreement is going to take a long time and it's going to get a little bit ugly between the players and the owners. And then in connection to that training camp really does start on July 28th.
It's interesting
because the more I ask, the more people tell me they're concerned that July 28th is not.
Yeah, I know you talked to some people. The coaches I spoke with said that as far as they knew,
mm-hmm.
their players are coming in and they're going to start on the 28th. Now, obviously, everything can be changed.
Right.
The virus doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It does what it does, and people get sick, sadly. And as you talked about earlier in our show here, we know the Texas numbers are pathetically bad. They're really bad in Florida. These clubs are going to have to make a decision. And one more thing before I know there are one or two other things we want to talk about before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Do not forget about the equity rule. You cannot have teams practicing, other teams not. This coach told me that their GM called the league and wanted. I can't remember the team, but there were one or two teams that shut down later in March than other teams did.
Mm-hmm.
And they were super pissed off. So their GM called the personnel, whoever they called, the NFL office, says, hey, why is this team not, getting out like everyone else is? So trust me, it'll be a problem. It'll be bloody hell if other teams are getting advantages or able to get their players on the field,
right?
And others can't. It won't happen. It's an equity rule. It'll be challenged. There's zero chance it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep it in mind on that. We'll see what happens. But man, Jeff, I'm glad you brought that up about your sources telling you about. There's some serious. Some people are questioning whether the players will be able to practice starting the 28th. Man, that
right.
This thing. I mean, we're less than 3 weeks away, man.
Well, that's what I keep thinking, though, Adam. Is that most people will listen to this podcast on the 13th or 14th, so you're going to be 16 or 15 days away from the start of camping. My God, 2 weeks feels like an eternity these days. But there's no reason that the players and the owners or their representatives shouldn't be talking every single day, going back and forth.
I'm sure they will.
Until they get closer. Yeah, I'm sure they will. And so there's really no excuse for having 3 weeks and not being able to come to a common agreement. Now, it might get ugly. There might be a lot of mudslinging. Bottom line is, on July 27th, there better be something in place, or else people are just going to be through the roof. And not just people. I keep outlining it. It's the NFL, like coach, like everybody needs to know what they're doing so they can go ahead with their plans. And if the longer this drags out, the worse it is for every facet involved, the players, the coaches, and the fans, everybody.
And Jeff, speaking of the players, we've mentioned this. Like, there was about 2 rookies signed, but this is not uncommon. The word around the league is, Jeff, that clubs would rather have their players get their physical from their team doctors and not the neutral doctor. And that's my understanding with in terms of where the Eagles are concerned. So, is there anything else you have on the situation?
As far as that, I've just heard that I would expect that, like we said, July 28th is when camp starts. I think maybe about a week, but I think a lot of it depends on when actual agreements are in place, and then things can speed up. But I would think that at least a week before camp, you'll start to see some of the Eagles picks get into camp and get signed. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. So first, let me pause to thank our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, doing a fantastic job of enhancing the fan experience by covering all 4 Philly sports like nobody else. They are for the fan, by the fan. It's really unique content. I would urge everybody to check them out. PHLSportsNation.com. Follow them on Twitter at PHLSportsNation or on their website, PHLSportsNation.com. And now
one thing there, real quick. One thing there.
Yeah.
They wrote a really good piece on Rager. I read it on Sunday. So go to PHL Sports Nation. As Jeff just said, they cover all the sports. All the sports. All
do
the
a
Philly
great
sports.
job.
Yep.
All right, now let's pause real quick for a word from our other great sponsors. All right, Adam, before we let's kind of wrap this up. I know that there was since we last did our podcast, just an update on the Deshaun Jackson situation, and I give you a lot of credit. I mean, you said that I think last podcast that it's not over just because Deshaun came up with his better second apology and the Eagles issued their statement, and that Deshaun had work to do. Since then, we have found out that Deshaun has met with some Jewish leaders, and he's starting to do his part. But B, the Eagles released their statement saying he was going to be fined, which is, I believe, the same thing that Riley Cooper had a fine.
Conduct detrimental, as we outline on Wednesdays inside the Birds TV.
That's right. The conduct detrimental, and that Deshaun has work to do. So I don't want to say it's fluid, although I think you can. They've got a couple of weeks before training camp starts. It sounds like things are along the right direction, but it also sounds like Deshaun's got to tread carefully and really understand what's going on with him and what he has to do going forward.
Yeah, so it's funny. We kind of in that ITV TV we outlined just about everything that was up to date at that point, and the only thing that's different is they put a statement on Friday. So Jeff, I was told Thursday that probably by Saturday they were going to have a sort of a joint statement, or just the club would put something out, and they felt that they moved along pretty well. What happened was Tuesday was awful. Obviously, we all know. And the crazy thing is the story actually should have broken on Monday, but it was July 4th weekend. It was the last day of that weekend. Obviously, Monday, people are off of work. Deshaun actually posted on Monday, early Tuesday morning. It broke like wildfire. The club found out about it. It was not pretty between Deshaun and the club, as we outlined. And what happened is Mike Rubin, who grew up in Philly, I actually grew up with Mike in a way. I haven't seen Mike in years, but Mike, the chairman of Fanatics, and Bernardi on the Sixers, who's a Jewish guy, he got involved from Deshaun's side and tried to help him out and got in his ear, and a bunch of people got in Deshaun's ear, and good for him. As disappointed as I was and most people were in this world with Deshaun on Tuesday. He stepped it up, as you outlined, over virtually. Obviously, he met with Jewish leaders, and he's going to visit the Holocaust Museum. In fact, one thing I want to relay a quick story. I talked to a coach this week who actually called me about Deshaun. He was not here in Philly with Deshaun, but he wanted to know how I was doing with all this because I'm a Jew. And he's like, hey, man, what were your feelings on it? And I explained it to him. And then he goes, as a kid, I went to the Holocaust Museum, our high school did. And he goes, it changed my life. This guy's not Jew. And he goes, it'll change Deshaun's life. He goes, no matter what he thought, or even though he's doing some good things, it'll take his thought process about Jewish people to another level. And it'll just change the way you look at it. And I'm glad that he's doing it, accepted. And Julian Edelman, I love that Julian Edelman spoke up and wants to meet with Deshaun. And Well, that's good. Look, Jeff and I have covered this player for over 13, somewhere around 13 years on and off. Obviously, he left the roster, but he's back now. And Tuesday was ugly. I had said, and I mean, I'll admit it. I did say that this thing doesn't look good. If it doesn't get straightened out, he would not be an Eagle by the end of the week. And for his part, he did a lot. And I know Jeffrey Lurie was not happy with him. It's not a secret, but he's on the roster now. They've resolved the situation. Deshaun's got a plan that he's going to do, but Jeff, he's in an evaluation period here. He's just got to do what he says he's going to do, which I'm sure he'll do. But the other thing is, one more thing before we get out of here, the social media habits, got to handle himself the right way and not embarrass the club.
Yeah, it feels like a little bit like probation, right? When someone does something wrong and they apologize and they seek to get better, but they're still on a period there where they can't screw up. I mean, you got to show, not just show that you learn through words, but through your actions. And it sounds like, as I said, Deshaun's headed down the right path here. A couple weeks till training camp, hopefully, and we'll get him to training camp, and then we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, so I would say these are some delicate couple of weeks for Deshaun, where I would have, if I were him or I was in his camp, I'd say like, may just, no matter what you say, you just may want to chill on social media for a little bit. Just chill for a little bit.
Just how you do it, and what he has to do is what his biggest lesson, other than understanding what he was saying, is that, and we're all like this when we tweet or post anywhere, how's this going to look and how's it going to be received? And that's the biggest lesson that we all took out of it. And I not that the Eagles are saying he's on a probationary period, but he obviously is, because if he does something to embarrass the club, I don't see any way that he's going to stay.
All right.
And plus, he got fined for it, conduct detrimental, which in a sense would avoid his guarantees, unless there's some language they put in. I have no idea what the discussions were on that, but bottom line is the guarantees are avoided. He's got to stay on the straight and narrow. Look, he's before we get out of here, you just have to understand who this guy is. He's happy-go-lucky. He's a positive guy. I think he actually said it really well when we did the Wednesday show. I just don't think he even knew what he was. I just don't think he understood.
Yeah,
but clearly he didn't, right?
Right. Well, I mean, again, and we've said this before, ignorance is not an excuse, but when you're trying to determine whether you think someone has actual hatred in their heart or is just kind of like oblivious to what they're doing, there's a line there. So Deshaun has apologized, and he's doing. Did he actually put out I think he put out a statement about visiting or talking with a rabbi, right? I thought Deshaun put something about.
Yeah, he actually talked to one, but again, hasn't done it in person yet because he's in Tampa,
of course.
But he's got a plan that he's going to have, and
right.
I give Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie credit. Deshaun's PR people, Sean's agent Brad Sakala, they all had some challenges this week. There's like no book on how to handle something like this.
There isn't.
Just as a innocent bystander, just gathering information from 5 or 6 people on this thing. I don't know what Tuesday was ugly. I just, I did like 17 interviews this week on this thing, and I was just like, I was burnt out from it. Wednesday, you and I talked up before we did ITB TV, and I was like, man, this cannot end soon enough. I can't take it any longer. It's just not as a human being here. I was just like, God, how much more could we talk about this thing?
Right,
but
no doubt.
It is a big story.
Yeah, it was. Now, speaking of big stories, good segue. We're going to have a lot of them on InsideTheBirds.com this week. As we did last year, 2 weeks out till training camp, Andrew DeCecco and I are going to do a series previewing things of the 2020 season, starting with training camp. Like, for example, Monday morning, when most people are listening to this, we'll have a story on who our breakout candidates are for 2021. And
give me one. I want one.
Well, I'll give you a hint. Neither of us chose Miles Sanders. So as much as we spoke about Miles Sanders, we each chose 2 different Eagles to have a breakout year in 2020. So make sure you catch that.
All right.
We're doing it Monday through Friday this week, next week. And if
love it.
Training camp gets delayed, we'll continue to do that. And so I'll tell people now, if you have a question for Adam for a mailbag, please ask away on our Facebook page.
Oh, they're on. They what happened was that, Jeff, before we get out of here, because we've changed our format a little bit. I love this, going over through like 5 or 6 items.
Right.
But I asked people, hey, what do you want us to talk about? And there's some great stuff there, which we'll never get to. So I'll probably answer a bunch. I'll make a mailbag out of that. Yeah. So it's all good. So this is a fun show. I like the way we're doing this now.
All right. So great. Our training camp preview series and your mailbag, we'll all have that on this week. So make sure you're subscribing and checking that out. All right. Want to thank everybody for listening to the latest Inside the Birds, of course, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. We thank our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. It's called Sports Talk with Broads. And you might want to check out his podcast as well that he does with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. It's called Processed. And obviously with the Sixers in the bubble and getting ready to go, Processed is going to be heating up. So him and Darrell will have a lot of great stuff to talk about. Check out Hunter's work on Twitter, also at Broads81. And look for an Inside the Birds TV to come out later this week. And some other stuff, like I mentioned, on InsideTheBirds.com. So, of course, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.